If you've ever taken a close look at the coordinates on the mini-map, you may have noticed that walking through a door or down a ladder can move you hundreds of meters from where you started. That's because the inside of that building is actually way out here in the void. And there are a lot of interesting things hidden out here if you know where to... Oh, what is that? And why is there a big A on it? I can answer both of those questions, so let's start there. This is the Asylum, which is what the A stands for. How do I know it's called that? Just a hunch. Okay, and it's written in the game files. The developers used this spot to load NPCs in advance, so they're ready when needed for certain dialogues and cutscenes, as well as items that they don't want lying around in the world where you might stumble onto them. A quick disclaimer. I'm using external tools to easily reach these locations, but this is the unmodded, normal version of the game. Okay, let's get started with the Goblin raiding party waiting patiently for their chance to attack the Grove. If you attack them here, the cutscene will actually trigger, though the camera does get a little confused.
Open the bloody gate!
Nobody gets in! Zevlor's orders!
Provoke the blade! And suffer its sting.
Omeluum hangs out here when he's not in the Myconid colony, though you can't actually talk to him here. In fact, he won't talk to you anywhere outside of his favorite spot in the Underdark. Here we have the Druid sentries that show up in the Grove to announce the attack on the Tieflings if you do something to annoy the Druids.
The idol! It's gone! Stolen! The time has come. Remove the outsiders!
After Voss's red dragon destroys the bridge, don't worry about those flaming fists. They didn't die, they just teleported up here. See, they're just fine. What's on the other side of that bridge anyway? It's the road to Baldur's Gate, right? Oh. This area looks empty, but there's actually something hiding here in a special state called offstage. This makes it invisible and non-interactable, which is good in this case since the spectator is naturally hostile. The reason it's here is because it's waiting to pop out of the iron flask if you actually decide to open it up. This unassuming lady is the Absolute, or more specifically, the disembodied voice. During the cutscene that triggers when crossing the bridge into the Goblin camp, this is who is actually talking to you.
Hear my voice. Obey my command.
Anytime someone other than the narrator speaks in a conversation or cutscene, the voice must be attached to somebody loaded into the current map. Oh hey, it's Gerson the Bent that Proxy found. The only purpose of this NPC is to distract you with a bit of dialogue if you're in the Grove when it's time for the Tieflings to all teleport into their new positions. Not that he does a great job of hiding it, but if he's not around, it is pretty jarring. But what about those other backup Tieflings that can show up during the camp party? Why aren't they also up here in the Asylum? Because they're already in your camp. All the time. You just can't see them because they're off stage, just like the spectator.
Watch out, Baldur's Gate. Shell's coming for you.
In fact, all 6 of them are also in your camp dead. Because they are the Tiefling corpses that the goblins are picking over during the evil camp party. There are some friends of Halsin's also waiting off stage right here. If you free Halsin from his cage, but then join the goblins and slaughter the Grove, he'll show up in your camp for revenge, and these are the 2 animals that help him during that fight. Speaking of Halsin, this book has weirdly complex Oh, hold on. Alright, Gale, this better be important.
Carsus.
Okay, as I was saying, this book has weirdly complex mechanics. Its whole purpose is to act as a way of learning about Moonrise Towers and the Shadow Curse if you don't find out by talking to Halsin or Minthara. If you kill Halsin first and then kill Minthara, this book will show up on her corpse. Or if you kill Minthara first and then kill Halsin, the book will show up on his body instead. If you don't kill Halsin but side with the goblins and raid the Grove, once the goblin party is over and Minthara considers stabbing you in your sleep, the book teleports into her bag. This way, if the conversation leads to a fight, you can find the book on her corpse. If instead you play nice with Minthara, she'll tell you about Moonrise Towers on her own, so the book is no longer needed. But since it already teleported into her inventory during the conversation, she'll still have it if you recruit her during Act 2. All that just to make sure you know where to go next. A developer comment in the script file actually calls it the Magical Teleporting Death Journal. Nearby, we have the Dark Urge hangout. Of course, the butler is here, waiting to make his first appearance in camp. Also, hiding off stage is the Dark Urge. This is the actual player character, not a dummy. The only reason I can find for him being here is a debug command that puts the Dark Urge into your party as another avatar. He can't move, but he can talk to companions. Alfira's Bard replacement is also here, and unlike most NPCs in the asylum, she can actually be spoken to, even if you're not playing as the Dark Urge.
Is there someone who you think you might love? Oh, come on. I won't tell.
I mentioned the butler waiting to make an appearance in camp, and the first time he shows up is to congratulate the Dark Urge on killing the Bard and to hand over your cloak as a prize. This cutscene is one of very few in the game that takes place in a special, unique location called a private camp room. Every camp has one, and on the Act 1 map, each one is hidden 100 meters below the camp itself. It's wild how much work went into crafting these areas when they may never even be seen by most players. If you look carefully during the Dark Urge cutscene, you can spot this painting in the background, which isn't anywhere in the normal camp area. You can't actually move around in these rooms or in most other dedicated cinematic areas due to the lack of an AI grid, which is what the game uses to map out walkable terrain. Oh, and the butler already has that cloak sitting in his bag, just asking to be pickpocketed. Of course, Mizora is here, preparing to show up in camp and chastise Will. Though after that first visit, she doesn't return to the asylum, so where is she? You guessed it, she's just chilling in your camp, off stage. The only reason Cazador is here in Act 1 is so that he can show up for a few seconds in a dream scene when playing as Avatar Astarion. And this is the real Cazador from Act 3, not a dummy, which is the main reason you don't want to start a fight up here. Next, we've got the Raphael gang, including these 4 Raphael dummies with various different hairstyles. These were intended to be used in the future for a scene where Raphael comes to camp to reveal secrets about the companions. As you can see, that scene was never finished. In case you didn't know, Raphael was originally called Monitor, and he's still called that in the game files. This is the real Raphael, the one that appears at various locations in Act 1 to strike up a conversation. Next to him is a dummy version of Raphael in devil form, which replaces him in the cutscene after he transforms. And this is a good time to point out that there's a large chunk of the House of Hope copied into Act 1 just for this short scene. But what's out that front door? Is it Avernus? Nah, it's just the owlbear nest. This platform used to be in Grimforge, in front of the Shar Temple, but in patch 6, Larian dragged it out of there and stuck it in the asylum so that people would stop trying to jump onto it and falling to their death. Speaking of that Shar Temple, let's take a look around down there. Again, it's not possible to walk in here, so moving the camera around is going to have to do. The place is pretty stylish for something you can barely see from the ledge above. This Arrow of Roaring Thunder is the one that Barkus will hand you during the Tiefling party if you ask him for it. It has a unique ID so that the game can teleport it around, but it's otherwise a totally normal arrow. And these nearby scrolls don't even have unique IDs, they're just normal scrolls without any reference in the script files. So I have no idea why they're here. Right next to those scrolls, we have this big pile of dream visitors, aka daisies. These 4 in the back are the default versions you technically start with before you customize your own. Up to 4 avatars means 4 defaults are needed. These other 3 duplicates hanging around are backups that are pulled in and disguised as your custom Daisy if you somehow manage to start more than one Dream Visitor dialogue at the same time. All the different Emperor copies are used in the same way as the Dream Visitors. Even though you don't actually see him in Mind Flayer form until after Act 2, the Emperor is a global character, so he shows up somewhere on every map. And your custom Dream Visitor is hiding here under the pile. Speaking of customizing, this spot probably looks familiar. If not, then maybe from this angle? Or, how about now? Though it's a little crowded in here. Right nearby, we have a spot that is probably less familiar unless you played during early access. But the modern Dream Visitor customization spot is over here. Oh, and there's also the Dark Urge hanging out with 4 naked bald dudes. Moving on. Way above the normal level up spot is this alternate version that is only used during the intro scenes for each origin character. If we take a bit of a trip off in this direction, we'll find an unexpected little area. These colored squares are the backgrounds for each character portrait. In the front, we have Gale, Astarion, Lae'zel, Shadowheart, Will, Karlach, Halsin, Minsk, Minthara, and Jaheira. Behind those are all the custom race portrait backgrounds. Those darker ones in the background are unused. And if we look very carefully, we can find this tiny little Macbeth color checker cube. Okay, enough of this diversion, let's get back to the asylum because there is plenty more to see. These are the Golden Path books. You can't actually read them, but examining them will describe a series of instructions meant to set up a demo of the game. And each book also has an associated spot on the map in the early parts of Act 1. These books have been here a long time, since way back in early access. But even the oldest videos that I can find of the game being shown off during development don't seem to match the situations described in these books. The only mention of them in the scripts even says they're obsolete. The pouch is empty, but the old script has a list of a few random consumables that may have been intended to be inside. Even though you meet your pixie friend during Act 2, you can use the bell to speak to her anywhere, so she needs to be available even on the Act 1 map. And the monk spirit back there works the same way. This werewolf is never used in the released game, but the game files do give us a hint as to who he may have been during development. His internal name is Were-Dad, and that ORI means that he's associated with one of the 6 origin characters. Tracing this layer data lets us find that he was designed to show up in a wolf dream in camp in Act 1. Now, there was a werewolf companion named Helia that was in the works during early access, but she was never completed. And this werewolf wasn't in the asylum until after early access. Wolf Dream is the name used in the files to refer to Shadowheart's childhood memory scene, and her father makes specific reference to being a lycanthrope. So my guess is that this was going to be his werewolf form before it was changed to the normal wolf seen in the final version. On that note, here's a look at where that Wolf Dream cinematic actually takes place. Withers is hanging out here until it's time for him to pop out of his sarcophagus in the crypt. But you can actually click on him and he'll pop out right here.
What a curious way to awaken.
You can say that again. But he won't appear in your camp until oh right, the Oathbreaker Knight. He technically starts in the asylum, but a quirk of his scripting causes him to teleport to your camp as soon as you get in range to see him. As I was saying, even though you already talked to Withers, he won't appear in your camp until you visit the crypt. Why is there a bear sitting here? When you first find Halsin in the Warg Pens, even though he's in bear form, that's the real Halsin speaking to you. But if you ask him to follow you around the goblin camp and then talk to him in bear form, you're actually talking to this voiceover dummy bear in the asylum. It's the same situation with this Quasit, who is the dummy used when talking to Shovel. Here is Volo's Guide to Goblins, and here it is again. This one is the real one, which is teleported into the inventory of the nerdy goblin sage as soon as Volo is captured by the goblins. If you talk him into handing it over, it will give Gale an inspiration point when you read it, just like it does here in the asylum. So, why is there a second copy? If you side with the goblins and raid the grove while Volo is still in your camp, he'll show up during the party in a nice comfy cage. If you talk him into handing over the book, you'll get this copy, which won't give an inspiration point when read. Spencer is a very old leftover from development that was already up here during early access. So old, in fact, that even his related flags already have deprecated written on them. Though we can see from those flags that he had some kind of interaction with Will. From digging around in the files, I can also tell you that Spencer is labeled as a monster hunter, and that this tiefling in the grove was meant to be an associate of his. But there's not enough information to know who Spencer was really intended to be. And speaking of old things from early access, the dream scenes with the Dream Visitor were originally very different and took place in a completely different spot. And this is that spot. Even though all the dialogue and other references to those old scenes have been removed from the files, the location used for the cinematics is still in the game, hidden away in a corner of the map. Oh, and when you hear
Down, down, down by the river,
this is supposedly the river she is singing about. Of course, in the released game, the dream scenes take place here. Though there is still a gazebo similar to the one seen in the old version. Anything interesting inside the skull? Not really, though you can actually walk around a little bit. Okay, I have no idea why those ladders are there. The one on the right is internally labeled as a goblin ladder, and it's just like many other ladders you see in Act 1, both in and out of the goblin camp. The one on the left says it's a rope ladder in the files, even though it is clearly not made of rope. The only other rope ladder is in Boal's Festering Cove, and it actually is made of rope. That reminds me, if I try to enter stealth right here, I get spotted by Boal. He's hiding up here until it's time for him to make an appearance in the cove. But he's not off stage, just invisible, so I can reveal him with Volo's eye. This is Norella, who is another unfinished character from early access. But unlike Spencer, she still has scripts that group her with the other tieflings in the grove, and voiced dialogue hidden away in the files. It took a fair bit of finagling, but I managed to unlock that entire conversation. It's actually long enough that I've put the whole thing in a separate video for those that want to see it. Though I will mention right now that it features a few lines of Shadowheart mocking you, since I know that some of you are into that. For now, here's what she says if you protect the tieflings from the druid attack.
Oh, hi, hello. You surprised me. But thank you for your help with the druids. A real star you are.
And since she's still in the list of tieflings, she will disappear from this spot once the other tieflings leave the grove. Now, it's actually possible to reach this asylum without any mods or external tools. It's not the easiest thing to do, so bear with me. First, you'll need any container that has a sliding lid, like this wooden trunk you can find in camp. Drop the crate on the ground in this spot in the swamp. Then, click and drag the crate way out here to the right of the specific tree. Move the cursor up until it switches from saying block to not enough space, and then release the mouse button. Next, pick a high-strength character to pick up and throw one of your other party members, but the instant you left-click to confirm the throw, immediately right-click to cancel action. Swap to another character and kill the one who did the fake throwing. Pick up their corpse and put it inside the crate, close the crate, and quickly drag and release the crate anywhere nearby while the lid is still closing. If you timed it right, the crate will go flying off to where you dragged the cursor earlier. Switch to the living character you first picked up and then save the game. Reload that same save and you've made it to this Act 1 asylum. Did you get all that? Oh, and feel free to drag your dead friend out of the crate and revive them. And while we're in the swamp, let me show you something else. If you pass the investigation check to reveal the true form of the swamp, a cinematic will play that shows the transformation from happy version to evil version. There is an entire copy of both versions of the swamp out here in the void, just to facilitate that one quick cutscene. I specified that crate flinging trick will get you to that particular asylum because there is one on every map in the game, no matter how small. For the Mountain Pass, this is the tiny little asylum. The Pixie and Monk are here for the same reason as the Act 1 map, since you can talk to them anywhere. And the pile of Dream Visitors and Emperors is also here just like Act 1, though there's an extra one hiding behind them this time. This weird, bald Daisy is who is talking to you during certain dialogues in the creche, but not all of the time. For example, when speaking to the Inquisitor, the real Daisy chimes in.
Don't do it. The weapon is how I protect you.
But when talking to the cave entrance inside the astral prism, the bald dummy is the one speaking. Don't ask me why. This is a Githyanki Ardent, who was designed to show up in the infirmary after you got on the doctor's bad side and had to fight your way out. He has a bit of dialogue in the files, so here it is.
This mess. This is your doing? Impressive. Our captain may have use for you. Report to her immediately. I am not in the habit of asking twice. Istik, the captain, now.
The only reference to this other Gith is a timeline file, the kind used for idle animations. In this case, he was meant to be standing in the classroom sharpening a sword on the whetstone. The only NPC who does that now is Varl if you save him, so the animation would probably look something like this. And right here is Vlaakith, the tiny little level 1 Lich Queen. This is who is speaking to you during the conversation in the creche. She's really not so big and impressive after all. I mean, that planecaster would make anyone look imposing.
You are permitted to look upon me. You are invited to kneel.
This key was once intended to be required to enter the secret chamber where the blood of Lathander is kept. If you look carefully at it, you can even see that the symbol of Lathander is part of the key. There's no door to actually unlock with it, however there is still a spot that triggers a voice line when you do or don't have the key.
That door. There were similar patterns on a key from earlier.
But it's a little out of the way. What's in this chest? Nothing special at the moment. But when you use the planecaster to enter the astral prism, you can't very well keep the prism in your pocket, so where does it go while you're in there? Right here in this chest. I mentioned private camp rooms on the main Act 1 map, but every camp in the game has one, so there are a couple for this area too. And the only cutscene I know of that can actually use one on this map is when Scratch and the owlbear cub wake you up in the middle of the night. If you look closely, you can see the same rug under the two animal pals. Speaking of those private camp rooms, you'd think that's where Lae'zel's first romance scene would play out, but it actually has its own unique location out here, which she somehow drags you to even if you set up camp in a cave. When you bump into the Dwagar on the ride to Grimforge, this is where those boats actually are. In fact, those Dwagar are already there waiting for you. Normally, there's no way to peacefully reach their boat, because you can't swap to another party member during the conversation. But because someone else could hop over there if you're in a multiplayer game, each of those other dwarves has their own bit of dialogue.
Stay on your own raft!
You trying to tip us over? Stop moving, idiot!
One wrong move and you're going in the lake.
Been a long day for all of us, so don't try nothing funny.
One step closer, and you're fish food.
And now we'll head to the Act 2 asylum. Let's start with God's favorite princess, or in this case, princesses. If you let Shadowheart kill the Night Song and become a Dark Justiciar, this dummy is who you actually see and hear during the scene. You could tell there was something going on, since she will always be wearing her default circlet, even if the real Shadowheart is wearing much more stylish headgear. Why did the devs bother with this? Because the appearance of a character is set as soon as a cutscene starts, even if they change their look in the middle of it. The full set of Dark Justiciar gear that Shadowheart automatically equips is right here on the ground. Selûne Shadowheart over here was designed to be used in an old version of the scene where Shar torments Shadowheart for sparing the Night Song, but in the current version she doesn't show up. You can tell it's an old model because she has an unfinished hairstyle that is never used by Shadowheart in the final version of the game. After Shadowheart deals with the Night Song, this is the spot where she appears while Happy Shar or Angry Shar is talking to her. And where is Shar herself? She's right over here. Whenever Shar speaks to Shadowheart, this is the source of that voice. It wouldn't matter what she looks like since you can't actually see her in Act 2, but she already put on her good vestments because she's going to make a much bigger appearance in Act 3. And she's only level 1? Psh, some god she is. Yeah, I should have known she wouldn't like that. Wait, you too? But hey, if you want an extra Spear of Evening and a couple more tadpoles, I won't tell anyone where you got them. On the other hand, Selûne's Spear of Night is over here. If you spare Night Song and invite her to camp, this is the weapon she hands over to Shadowheart as a reward. The mace right next to it is labeled as a backup weapon, but it's never actually used. Perhaps at some point the spear would have been in Aylin's back pocket, and if she found it missing, she would have given you this piece of junk as a consolation prize. Okay, this group is going to take a bit of explaining. They're all connected to Shadowheart, with these two in the front being very old versions of her parents. With not only different names, but also different races. Her mother is an elf, while her father is human. These other three all have placeholder names, but their internal labels reveal who they are. This is the Mother Superior, though it's clearly not Viconia. This one is a Torturer. And finally, the files appear to say that this is Shadowheart's sister. The only reference left to any of these characters is in the file for the cinematic that shows when riding the elevator down into the Gauntlet of Shar, but that scene has nothing to do with them. And no, nothing happens if they're on the elevator with you, I checked. And if that's Shadowheart's sister, then why is she a human instead of a half-elf? Something's missing here. To get to the bottom of this mystery, we have to go way back to the early days of early access. In this old patch, there is a dialogue file for a scene showing one of Shadowheart's memories that would have been triggered while in the Gauntlet of Shar, which was originally planned to be right here in Grimforge. To make it a bit easier to read, I've replaced the IDs with the placeholder names. All 5 of the characters are in this scene, and we see that it's not Shadowheart's actual sister, but rather the Sister Superior, who is forcing Shadowheart to torture her parents. Which explains why those 2 characters in the asylum look so beat up. Shadowheart also seemed to have some sort of inherent magical power in her hand that may have come from Selûne, since the early access note describes her hand as giving off sparks that resemble moonlight, and back then the flare-ups happened in her left hand. In the released game, it is the wound in her right hand that flares. Speaking of torture, okay, that was an awkward segue, but the point is the self-same trial was originally called the Mental Torture Trial. And this is what the clones all look like before they get a chance to copy you. This Rod of Resurrection is not used anywhere in the game, though the files do connect it to Balthazar in the Gauntlet of Shar. There was a Rod of Resurrection item in Baldur's Gate 2, and Balthazar took his name and ribs from a character in that game, so this might have been another planned reference. I always thought it was a bit strange that this treasure is locked behind a door with such a high DC and no other way to open it besides knock. It turns out there was meant to be a way to open the door with some sort of control. The mechanics of how it would work are still in a script, but the item itself is not in the files. Usually I find leftover items with no use, but this time I found a leftover use with no item. The script itself references a cleric of Shar, which is also nowhere to be found in Act 2 of the released game. It's possible the character was replaced by Lithindor, who has his own secret treasure, or perhaps it was meant to be the original version of Nightsong from Early Access. Your Gear's memory foam mattress is just an item, but it's given a special status that allows Speak with Dead to be cast on it. The corpse you're actually speaking to is this bed, up in the asylum. That's why it glows when you have Recast Speak with Dead active, just like any other corpse you can speak to.
Not a question, but good.
This version of the Librarian is actually a character that has the Silence Aura as a passive and the ability to summon Justiciars. It's so old that it has deprecated on its name in the files. The current Librarian is just an item, and destroying it simply removes the silence field from the room. Also in the Silent Library, there's this door floating under the ground. What's it there for? This is where the Shard door moves to after you open it, of course. Right next to that old librarian in the asylum, we've got an extra set of Minthara's undergarments. These were added in patch 6 and are automatically equipped onto Minthara if you knocked her out in Act 1 and stole every stitch she had on. This way, when she shows up in Moonrise, she can maintain her modesty in front of the goblins. When you investigate the cracked wall in Moonrise Towers, not only is this the object that you reach your arm through during the scene, it also speaks during the dialogue. When the Absolute takes on a more normal tone, this piece of wall is the source of that voice. The big booming Absolute voice in that scene is over here, but the model it uses is invisible. You can still mouse over it to know it's there, but I can also make it a bit easier to see if I cover it in something. Down in the Moonrise prison, there's a key stuck in a wall way out here where Larian thought they could hide it from me. Internally, it's called the Trap Room Entrance Key, but there are no doors or anything else that it unlocks. Digging deeper, I found that there are still pieces of the environment in the prison labeled as Trap Room, and they're all in the area that now has the spot where you can jump up to reach the boat. But what's more interesting is this very old dialogue with a character called the Cellar Master, who would have been guarding the trap room door. He's described as a male drow with short swords where his arms would be, which he's not too happy about. The dialogue makes many references to Illumination, a plot thread that is completely absent from the finished game. It's only referenced in a dev note that says the Absolute would have mentioned the Path of Illumination when she first talks to you in Act 1. And in fact, the Cellar Master dialogue is so old, the Absolute is referred to as he. When talking to the severed head in the Mind Flayer colony, you're actually talking to this severed head that's floating here in the asylum. It's floating because it has a body, but that body is invisible. If I make it a bit more visible, you can see its creepy giant hands. This is a piece of Mind Flayer furniture meant to be used in the colony. Meant to not be used. It does look an awful lot like a really big resonance stone. Duke Ravengard is here so that he can make an appearance during the introduction of Orin and Gortash in the colony, and the poor guy is already kneeling. And if I change his appearance a bit, that will also be reflected in the cutscene. The cute little Elder Brain over here takes part in the same cutscene, but I'm sorry to report that disguising it as something else doesn't show up during the scene. Oh, and hiding under the brain is Ketheric, or rather a dummy version. When it's time for Ketheric to transform into the Apostle of Merkel, this is who is speaking to you and swan diving into the pit. And of course, the voice of Merkel that you hear during that scene is actually this guy. But hey, he's level 3, so at least he's got Shar beat. So, what about the Apostle of Merkel itself? Well, there is one hiding off stage over here, but this is just a dummy that is only used to show the Apostle burning up at the end of the fight. The one you see crawling out of the hole and fight against during the battle is Ketheric. That's why you can stick a big pile of gold in his pocket before the fight, then use the Twist of Fortune mace to finish the Apostle in one smack. Everything that makes him into the Apostle of Merkel, from stats to spells to visuals, is wrapped up into one buff that is applied to Ketheric. But that same buff can be applied to anyone, giving them all the same benefits. Though you do also lose the ability to move. Unfortunately, the scythe is sold separately. It's hiding off stage in the asylum until it's time for Ketheric to pick it up. And it's not possible for a character to equip it. Okay, it's not supposed to be possible. You even gain access to the Apostle's signature attack. Oh, whoops. Well, at least I killed the Elder Brain. And when I say that anyone can become the Apostle of Merkel, I do mean anyone. Before that fight with Marcus starts, all of his ghoul friends are just hanging out inside the inn off stage. I've set their faction to friendly for the moment, but I could make them friendly only to me and let the Harpers take care of them. There's an extra winged horror up in the asylum that is labeled as Mole Kidnapper, but it doesn't actually take part in the cutscene. Again, I've made it friendly so that we can get a close look at it, but it's naturally hostile. Though I'm sorry to say that killing it doesn't stop Mole from getting kidnapped. It may have been used in a past version of the scene. If you let Isabel get taken by Marcus, you'll trigger the scene where Last Light Inn is overtaken by the Shadow Curse, starting with Fist Ulthred. But if he was somehow already dead before this scene happens, someone needs to fill in for him. That someone is up in the asylum, and his name is Tav. Oh, and if Marcus dies during the attempt to capture Isabel, but she still gets knocked out by the winged horrors, there's one last ghoul waiting around off stage just to carry her to Moonrise. No joke, this one is called Taxi Ghoul in the files. In the current game, Khalid's gift isn't found until Act 3, but this one here is referenced in the script for the ending segment of Act 2, when Jaheira is waiting around in Moonrise. There's no clues for why it's here other than flags for having and giving the item during dialogue. So it may have been that the player would have found the necklace and handed it over to Jaheira, or that she would have given it to the player as a gift. These days, Damon creates the flawed Helldusk pieces on the spot when you trade him the Infernal Iron. But prior to patch 3, the items were teleported from up here into your inventory. The reason the items aren't already in his inventory is so that you can't just buy them or pickpocket them. For the same reason, Bex's handmade cookies are also sitting up here getting stale. If you try to swipe these before she's ready to hand them over, all you get is a potato. There's nothing in this spot right now, but depending on your choices in Act 1, it might look like this. If you don't convince Roland to stay and protect the Grove, not all the Tiefling refugees will make it to Last Light Inn. If the Ritual of Thorns completes before you help the Tieflings, then none of them will make it. So how does the game handle that scenario? When you first enter Act 2, any Tieflings that shouldn't make it to Last Light Inn alive are all teleported up into this spot and killed, then set off stage. If Roland did stick around, he'll end up running off into the darkness looking for Cal and Leah. When he does, he'll leave behind this hologram projector. And the speaking hologram itself is this Roland dummy in the asylum. Though you could make a case that every version of Roland is a bit of a dummy. And to make sure that Roland has a light source to protect him from the Shadow Curse, he has his own dedicated torch sitting right here. Halsin also gets a torch of his own, used when he walks out to the lake to open the portal to the Shadowfell. Thaniel isn't even in the Shadowfell at all, he's just hiding right here. And of course, all of the shadows are also waiting around off stage. What is that out across the lake, anyway? Torches and a boat? This is where your campsite is if you go to camp while inside Last Light Inn. So, when you're in that camp, you can also see the spot where Halsin's portal would be, as well as Isabel's balcony. Her room is a bit sparsely furnished, though. Speaking of camp, just like in Act 1, each of them has a matching location called a private camp room, used for very few cinematics. In Act 2, one such example is seen when the butler shows up to congratulate you for killing Isabel. And not only are the visuals of the room unique to each camp, but if you choose to kill Scaleritus, how he dies will change depending on which camp room you're in. For the indoor rooms, like this one in Moonrise, you'll toss him into the fireplace. But for the open rooms, like the Last Light Inn Beach, he'll go flying off into the lake. Karlach's romantic night also takes place in the private camp room, but it doesn't make a good example since it shows little of the room and a bit too much of the romance. Though on the topic of companion romance, Gale's Night Under the Stars begins when he takes off and leaves his double behind. But he's actually just standing around off stage with his normal dialogue. Oh no, Gale, don't do it.
The Carside Weave.
The Starry Night scene itself takes place here, though there's no blanket at the moment. If you do move on to the romantic version of the scene, you'll end up here, in Gale's home in Waterdeep. He wasn't kidding when he said he had a lot of books, though he never actually mentioned playing the piano. Out past the balcony is a full view of Waterdeep. It may be that the statue in the distance is meant to be one of the walking statues of Waterdeep, possibly the Honorable Knight. Of course, the pixie is here in Act 2, but as usual, she and the monk are always hanging around since you can talk to them anywhere. But you don't even need to save the pixie from Karnas since you can just swipe her bell from right off the ground. If Karnas was set off stage at his spawn point, then he couldn't participate in the dialogue with the caravan. So instead, he's spawned up here and given a really long dialogue range. When you play the lyre, he'll teleport down to his starting position. You can talk to him up here, but the camera really wishes you didn't. In early patches, this shadow barrier was down in town, where Oliver's fight takes place, but it has since been moved up here. The real Night Dome is waiting in place offstage. Nearby, there is a hidden trigger right next to where Arabella is standing that is designated as a spot for her father. Oh, but he would probably be alive. I say this because there is also a position for him in camp. And not only in Act 2, but also including the Act 3 camps where Arabella has her own designated spot as well. So it seems that at some point in development, it was meant to be possible to save Arabella's father, and they would stay together in your camp. Just like in Act 1, these are a bunch of backups and placeholders for the Emperor and Dream Visitor. The real Emperor is hiding here at the end of the line. Though right in front of him we find this character called Scourge. He's not used for anything in the game, with nothing but basic character information and visual data, which makes him kinda look like The Rock. In fact, that visual data first showed up all the way back in Early Access Patch 5. His faction ties him to Moonrise Towers, and he's a global character, meaning he could have been intended to be part of Act 3 as well. Who knows? This spot is empty, but way above it is a floating chest that's never used in the game scripts. Unfortunately, I can't get close enough to open it up there. But I can bring it down to me. Wasn't worth the trouble, though. If you blow off the warnings from the Dream Visitor and try to leave Act 2 without defeating Ketheric, you'll be turned into Mind Flayers and get a game over. Though if you look closely in the background, or quickly when returning to the main menu, you can see that your characters are actually standing around on the brain platform where the final battle takes place. That platform is floating way out here just for that scene. And you can even walk around on it, though you can't climb the arterial mesh. The voice of the Absolute that speaks to you during that scene is in the asylum, but it's as invisible as you can get. Even hovering the cursor over it shows nothing, so let's change it to something a little easier to see. It's possible to reach this asylum by using the same trick I explained for Act 1. After you've got your friends inside the crate, drop it off here in camp near the magic mirror. The spot you're aiming for with the crate is right here. Open it, close it, drag it, save, reload, and there you are. When you successfully finish the act and leave for Baldur's Gate, if you lifted the Shadow Curse, you'll see a cutscene of Moonrise and the rest of the town being cleansed. There's a copy of that whole chunk of the map out here just for that cutscene, though the inside of Moonrise Towers has seen better days. Before you actually reach Act 3, there's just a bit more to see, starting with the cutscene between Gortash and Orin. Both of them, as well as the Flaming Fist disguise, are hanging around in this unnecessarily big asylum. The painter in that scene never speaks, so he's not here. And that scene itself takes place here, though it's pretty much just a copy of Gortash's real office with slightly different lighting. Once you go to bed, you'll be rudely awoken by the voice of the Absolute, who is once again hiding back here, totally invisible. And what's this Traveler's Chest here for? If you remember the chest from Act 1, you might have already guessed. Once you go inside the Astral Prism to help the Emperor, the prism can't be in your bag at the same time, so it's moved to this chest. But if you leave the astral plane even by teleporting, it goes back into your bag. So I'll have to bring the chest to me to show it to you. After you deal with the Gith and finally meet the Emperor,
it would be extremely painful.
He'll show you a number of locations while describing his backstory. So let's take a closer look at him. These are the city walls, but there's not much to see other than the Royal Lance board back here. Though I'm not sure why old Baldy bothered casting Featherfall and diving off, since there ain't much to see down there either. Moving on, we have the original uncursed version of Moonrise Towers. And hey, there's a sale on pottery. Inside the tower itself is a bit empty, and I think the construction crew forgot something when building these stairs. The dungeon is not actually under there, but rather way over here instead. The chair from the cutscene isn't here, but you can see the streak of blood on the floor. It's nice to get a better look at the Emperor's office in Baldur's Gate since it's quite well furnished. And let's take a look at what's on the table. Wait a second, invasion plans? I knew it! Taking a short hop over here, we find the den where Impy shares a drink with Stelmane, and where Gortash makes his sudden entrance. And finally, this city street where the Emperor indulges in a late-night snack. Where does Orin actually go when she disappears like this? Right here with her sisters. This is the Worm's Rock Asylum in Act 3. But enough about that for now, let's get right to the sheep. This is Harvard Willoughby. Why is there a sheep named after the comedian? There isn't. The comedian is named after the sheep, according to this developer note. But there's a lot more to this sheep than just the name. Now, I know that some of the stuff I do in my videos can make it hard to believe your eyes, but the secret I'm about to show you is really in the game and requires no mods, hacks, or cheats. Step 1, you gotta kill the human Harvard. The guards will have words with you if they see it, but you can just hop to a waypoint before they catch you. Then you need to ring each of these 2 bells. One of them is at the top of the central watchtower near the lower city's central wall waypoint. The other is in the open hand temple bell tower. It doesn't matter which bell you ring first, but Harvard must be dead before you ring the second bell, or the trick won't work. If you did it right, an egg will appear in the Worm's Crossing camp, back here where Scratch and the owlbear cub hang out. When you click the egg, Harvard the sheep drops out of the sky, and then becomes a summoned creature attached to whichever character clicked the egg. Why is he called Nature's Vengeance? I don't know, but he does have some pretty naturey spells available to cast, as well as being immune to fire damage. Which is good, since as soon as he enters combat, he's set on fire. Speaking of, starting on round 3 of a fight, he has a chance to explode, hitting all nearby targets, friend or foe. The chance to explode increases with each round of combat until he's guaranteed to blow up on turn 30. But if you end the fight with Harvard still alive, you can continue to use him, and he can be tucked away for safekeeping by clicking the egg again. But if he dies, either from taking damage or from exploding, he can't be summoned again. But there's a lot more to see in the asylum than just a sheep. Right next to Harvard, we have this dead Gortash dummy that fills in when you cast Speak with Dead on the real Gortash so that you can hear the voice of Bane.
I am Bane, the Black Lord. I am the ultimate tyrant. I am fear. I am hate.
You don't fear death. You welcome it. Your punishment must be more severe.
But why does he have this weird portrait? Because the actual voice of Bane comes from this guy. This Bane NPC also speaks when Gortash casts Invoke the Black Hand during combat.
Faithful Gortash, servant of darkness, be my black hand.
After you kill Gortash and loot his Netherstone gloves, those gloves are actually deleted and replaced by the stoneless gloves and the Netherstone itself, as well as Gortash's hand. That's why the stone and hand are sitting here in the asylum. If you pick up the stone from the ground, you can see the hand disappear and show up in your bag. Hanging around near Bane, there's this tiefling hiding off stage. At some point in development, he was intended to greet the player as soon as they entered Worm's Crossing and inform them that Raphael was waiting in Charest's Caress. There are bits and pieces of information about this meeting scattered through the files, so putting it all together, it might have looked something like this.
You're here in one piece. We knew you'd make it. My employer has an invitation you won't want to turn down.
Hold on. Did he just slip something into my pocket?
As I showed earlier, there are a bunch of Orin dummies chilling up here. They're used to assist in her various transformation scenes so that she can switch appearance and voice in the middle of a dialogue. There are even more Orins in the Lower City Asylum, but we'll get there soon enough. Speaking of dummies, this copy of Fist Jara is only here so that she can say a single line in the Absolute's voice during the nymph scene.
Gather, prepare, become.
Waiting in this corner are the two gnomes that show up to toss a bomb at the Steel Watcher when you get scanned at the Worm's Crossing checkpoint. But depending on your earlier choices, you could see a different set of gnomes instead.
Eat this, you pile of junk!
Do you remember the magical teleporting death journal from Act 1? Well, this is the sequel. If Will chose to break his pact with Mizora, she'll tell Floric that Will killed the Duke and she'll show up looking for revenge. When she does, this book will teleport into her bag so that she can hand it over if you talk her down, or you can find it on her corpse if you're forced to kill her. If Floric didn't escape from Worm's Rock prison, or she was already dead, then her replacement, Cordula Eltan, will get the book instead. If you rescue Duke Ravengard before being confronted by Floric, or if Will asks Mizora to resurrect him after he died, the book is teleported into his bag. That way, he can be the one to hand it over when you talk to him in camp. Oh, and even before Mizora shows up in your camp, those two devilish friends of hers are already hiding off stage, peeping on Halsin. All the trouble with that book is just to get you down here into the Wormway. The statues of Balderon can all speak, so where is that voice actually coming from? Why, Balderon, of course. Though I bet you didn't know he's secretly been a half-orc all this time. On that note, the voice of Answer also doesn't come from the bony dragon itself, but rather this dragonborn ghost nearby, who has the dwarven racial passive for some reason. If Floric did survive until Act 3, this chest is used to store her weapon while she's locked in prison. But the devs also used it as a place to get rid of this weird fake tadpole. Prior to Patch 3, it was inside the chest in Gortash's office. Now there's just a regular tadpole in there. And if you're curious, the door is just an old leftover from Worm's Rock Fortress and doesn't go anywhere. The crystal, ladders, and stairs aren't used for anything either, though the stairs do give you a good target for the crate flinging trick that I explained for the previous maps. The Pixie and Monk are on every map, just like this bunch of backups for the Dream Visitor and Emperor. And your real Dream Visitor is buried under the pile even after the Emperor has revealed himself. Before we move on to the Lower City Asylum, there's just a bit more to show back here, starting with this Steel Watcher. It's used just for the one time Gortash speaks to you through the Steel Watcher when you first enter Worm's Rock Fortress. That way, the voice of Gortash can come out of that Steel Watcher even though speaking to this Steel Watcher still uses the normal voice. Trust me, it all makes sense. This is a cute little voiceover dummy for any time the bears talk, like the crate in the barn.
Can you please give me a hug?
And the dummy is just a copy of one of the usual bears, so it's just as explosive.
Your arms would be so snug.
Dribbles here is a dummy for the clown down in the circus, since he's actually a doppelganger in disguise. A corpse can be used as the source of a voice, but not when it's chopped up into pieces. This dummy is also used for the ghost of Dribbles during the murder tribunal, if you submit his hand as evidence of your murder. If you look closely, you can even see that this model is missing its hand. Though the other tribunal ghosts aren't, but we'll get to them later. There's one more thing back here, hiding off stage right next to the clown. The sculpture you can buy from Boney in the circus starts out as this guy. It's transformed into the player character, then given a specific condition that turns it to stone while striking a heroic pose. And yeah, it works on anyone. If I remove that condition from the actual sculpture, then we just get a copy of Shadowheart standing around in your camp up on a pedestal, where she belongs. The Lower City Asylum is a whole lot bigger and has its own supply of Orin dummies. This one is used so that she can briefly transform into the Dark Urge while taunting him in the Ball Temple. The other two dummies were in the Worm's Crossing Asylum with the same purpose, but this one is also used to store any items Orin copies while impersonating someone. This is how speedrunners reach this asylum by sticking a corpse in Orin's pocket while she's transformed. The real Orin never teleports to this asylum, just straight down into the Ball Temple to wait for you. But anything that was in her pocket is teleported up here into this dummy's inventory. Speaking of the Ball Temple, the Ball avatar is hanging out over here. This is the source of the voice during Orin's conversation with a non-Dark Urge character.
No, Orin. You did this for me.
But it looks like the butler without his hat because it's also the model used when Ball talks directly to the Dark Urge after dueling Orin. Oh, and here's his hat. When you kill Orin in that fight, she is replaced by this lovely gore pile, but she's actually still lying on top of it off stage. The gore acts as her corpse, with all her lootable items inside it. Of course, the items inside the gore include her two daggers. And just like Gortash's gloves, when you pick up Orin's Netherstone dagger, what actually ends up in your bag is the stoneless dagger and the stone itself, which are both sitting right here. If the developers had just hidden Orin's Netherstone on the floor in the temple, the way they did with Ketherick's stone, then the speedrunners would be sad. To get into the Ball Temple for that showdown with Orin, you need the Amulet of Ball. Well, there's an extra one hiding off stage here. This one is a bit different from the one carried by Saravok, and was designed as a backup that you could have gotten from a Ball lieutenant, who's nowhere to be seen. That's because he's hiding off stage here in the Ball Temple approach. There are also a whole bunch of other Ball cultists hiding in this same area. The devs didn't know what to do with them, so they just set them all off stage. They even have dialogue that was meant to play between them.
It is our time. Can you feel it?
Indeed. The streets will soon sing with blood. The cattle above have no idea what is coming.
To get the normal version of the amulet, you gotta hit up the murder tribunal. And this dummy is used to transform into your handless murder victim. If you're a Dark Urge that chewed off Gale's hand, then he'll show up at the tribunal using this dummy. Though you'd need to hand off the hand to your right-hand man to turn in, since the Dark Urge skips the judgment.
The crown.
If you swiped Stelmane's hand from Dolar's sack and ditched the rest, then this offstage dummy will be used for her appearance at the tribunal. You even get an extra line from the Emperor.
Can it be? Berlin herself, reduced to a spectre.
And for some reason, the ghost dummy has stats copied from the Echo of Abazagal, giving it the same vendor inventory and the same tag that makes it immune to pickpocketing. However, when it transforms into your murder victim, it copies the tags of the original hand owner, overwriting the block pickpocketing tag and letting you swipe the items, if you do it while the dialogue with Saravok is still going on. The hands from the victims that aren't already dead are lying around over here next to a bunch of other serial killer stuff, including this row of doppelgangers that all teleport down into Figaro's shop when it's time for his attempted murder to begin. There are also 2 normal folks that appear outside the shop at the same time, with a script that makes them wander around in this spot. But that script is really effective, and will send them there no matter how far away they are. Both of them start out in the asylum with the doppelgangers, but as soon as I move in range, you'll see them start to head home. But how do they get out of the asylum? There's an invisible door right here that leads into Jahira's house. They keep strolling and strolling until they reach their favorite hangout. Just past that spot is the Baldur's Gate of Baldur's Gate. If you try to approach the gate itself, you'll get repeatedly stunned and teleported away before you can get close enough to click it. The stun effect has a DC of 99, but if you just happen to roll a 20 every time, there's just enough time to click the gate before the teleport, leading to a unique dialogue.
Stop this madness. Turn back.
Come. Obey. Yield.
We must discover the brain's hiding place before we attempt to confront it. The brainquakes are coming from beneath the city. We should seek it there. But you do not have all the netherstones. You cannot defeat it without them. Turn back. You will be dominated, enthralled. It will be the end of you, the end of me, the end of everything. Of all the ways I thought this might end, I warned you. The brain is too powerful here. My protection is insufficient. You have ruined us. All of us.
On the other hand, a character with no tadpole can just waltz right up to the gate and click on it, though the brain wants nothing to do with them. The source of the voice for the oddly named Elder Brain in that scene is an invisible object in the asylum. I can turn it into something visible, but there's still nothing to click on. While we're covering invisible voices, there's another one back here in the corner. Even though you can't see it, it does show up on the minimap. This is who is speaking to you through the dumbwaiter in the Elf Song Tavern camp.
Oh, fine. Right, you. Food? Supplies? What do you want?
If I make her a bit more visible, you can see her hanging around the dumbwaiter while she chastises you. Oh, and ignore those floating chairs, they're just part of the Elf Song Tavern, forever stuck out here. And nearby, we've got even more invisible folks to cover. Every god that you can pray to in the tabernacle has its own invisible helper. When you donate gold to gain the god's favor, you're actually increasing your reputation with one of these NPCs, with 100 attitude being required to receive their blessing. That's why it's cheaper if you're low level, and why that specific god's NPC shows up as green on the minimap in the asylum. Though as soon as you give them the gold, it's immediately moved to the chest in the tabernacle basement. On top of that, Mistra's invisible helper is used as the stand-in for Mistra during her conversations with Gale, by disguising it to look like her. And at least she has stats befitting a god. On the other hand, Shar already has her own model standing around back over here. This is used for Giant Shar to talk down to Shadowheart in the Cloister of Somber Embrace. But come on, anything sounds important when you're 10 stories tall.
The Crown of Castus.
Next to Shar, we've got some curious cut content to cover. In the finished game, when you talk to Dammon with Karlach in the party, he will mention that the mistress of the house lets him work there. Who's that mistress? Well, the sign next to the door says that this is the Diabolic Forge, and there is a devil head above the forge inside. If you enter the locked door on the side of the building, you'll end up in the basement and find a few more devilish items. But more importantly, busting through this wall will bring you into the basement of the Devil's Fee, and that's no coincidence. There is a long list of unused flags that reveal that Damon was hired by Hellsick to craft hellish equipment. And more than that, the flag descriptions suggest there was an entire quest to assemble several devilish items, including these sitting in the asylum and others that aren't in the files. Each of the items is named after one of the archdevils of the Hells: Levistus, Lord of Stygia; Malagard, Lord of Malbolge; Mammon, Lord of Mineros; and Titivilus? Oh, Titivilus, Lord of Dis. Each piece of equipment would have been crafted from another item that you found in Baldur's Gate, possibly using the Pendulum of Malagard to locate them. This dev note says that the pendulum should have a visual effect when equipped, but it looks like they never got around to it. One of the initial items still in the files is this Needle of Levistus, which would have been pulled from a severed head the hag keeps in her basement, right here. The head isn't in the game for me to show it to you, but it does have voice lines.
Make it stop, Cannonball! The pain! The screaming!
The player characters also have voiced reactions when trying to remove the needle from his head.
Nasty case of brain freeze. That dagger's frozen solid.
Once each of the items was crafted, Damon would have used them all to create one final piece of armor, though it probably would have been something stronger than this. And he also would have had a much more diabolic forge to work on, seen here. But the quest was cut before this room was ever added to the game map. So how did I get here? The same way I got here. There is actually one line of dialogue still in the game that requires one of those unused quest flags to be set, and it's in the conversation with the Drow twins. I gotta position the camera carefully for this next part since a couple of these Harlep dummies forgot to put on pants. The real Harlep is already in the House of Hope, but this dummy is used for his succubus form. And this other is used for his brief transformation into the player character. You know, this whole scene was really not made for YouTube. If you start a fight with Harlep, a bunch of imps will show up to help him out. But before that happens, they're all hanging out up here. Oh, come on. Okay, this nude model is transformed into the player and equipped with this set of debtor's attire during the conversation with Hope, since new equipment won't show up on a character during a dialogue. That's why Shadowheart's hair turns black at this point, since that's now the dummy standing in for her. After the conversation ends, these other 4 sets of clothes are equipped onto the party members. Before we leave the House of Hope, let me solve the mystery of this so-called portal for you. The only reason it says portal is because it's just a copy of the art asset used here above an actual portal, in the portal room. There's no hidden mechanic, and it doesn't do anything when you click on it. Now you know. And how about this platform above Gale, help me out.
Ramesses Tower in the upper city.
Thanks. So, what's the secret behind this? It's only here as a spot for Nightsong to very briefly stand before she jumps down into the tower to confront Lorroakan. It happens too quickly to see, but this is where she would be standing. Why does it have a lever on it? Because it's just a copy of the same elevator platform the bear is sleeping on in the Druid Grove. This lever doesn't actually do anything but briefly shake the screen the same way it does in the den when it starts moving. There's no secret. While I'm ruining old mysteries, how about another? In this hidden area under Cazador's palace, there are a series of pressure plates used to open the doors and to open this chest, with a number of treasures in it. In earlier patches, there were extra levers spread around the room, some of them broken into pieces. But in patch 5, they removed those levers by just moving them into the asylum and setting them off stage, along with several other components of the traps, like this door. Okay, but why does the chest click when you open it? That has to be something secret, right? Nope, it's nothing. The chest, pressure plates, and traps are combined into what's called a constellation, and each object in a constellation has certain traits assigned to it. The constellation config for this chest is the same as things like buttons, which all produce a click when pressed. That's all there is to it. Also, there's no Santa Claus. Another quick bit about Cazador. If you choose to break his staff in half and leave the vampire spawn prisoners to rot, the staff isn't actually destroyed, it's just teleported into this chest in the asylum. This other chest nearby has a similar purpose for items in the Steel Watch Foundry, most notably the rune powder bomb. When you set the bomb to explode and take off with this fantastic running animation, the bomb doesn't blow up, it just pops up into this chest. Just north of the Steel Watch Foundry is this railway area. I've seen some people wondering what's across the gap, so here it is. Not much to look at, I'm afraid. Speaking of the Steel Watch Foundry, if you wait until you've already agreed to meet Gortash in the Morphic Pool to take on the Netherbrain together, then finally go to the Iron Throne, you'll get a unique line of dialogue before the usual prison break sequence begins.
Intruders! Lord Gortash's orders were clear! The Iron Throne must be destroyed!
Who is that Black Hand of Bane? It's this spectator, here in the Iron Throne Asylum. There's not much else to see in here other than this Omeluum dummy just used during the escape cutscene. If you show up to the Iron Throne at one of the more usual times, Gortash will speak to you on the scrying screen. That's not the real Gortash, but rather this dummy sitting around inside the prison. And finally, we've reached the Endgame Asylum, but before we explore that, we're going to begin in the upper city sewers. I know it's not exactly the most scenic place to start, but it's worth it to find Minthara hiding down here. If you didn't kill her in Act 1, and you didn't recruit her in Act 2, she will remain under the control of the Absolute and join the group that got stuck on sewer duty.
For the Absolute!
If you free her from Moonrise Towers, but then tell her to kick rocks, her dialogue will even hint at this outcome.
I admire your confidence. But when you next see me, I may have the Absolute's armies at my back.
If this isn't your first time seeing Minthara in the sewer, then let's take it up a notch. If you hand the Night Song over to Balthazar without recruiting Minthara into your party, she'll turn up as a zombie inside the Mind Flayer colony, even if you killed her in Act 1. Once you break out of your pod to take on Balthazar, she'll join in on the combat. But she's really stupid and likes to just waste her turn on dashing nowhere. So you can ignore her while you finish off old Balth and the other zombies, and then just leave the room without fighting her. As soon as you get far enough away, you'll break combat and you can just move on. Once you finally reach the High Hall sewers, Zombie Minthara is down there waiting for you. But we're not done yet. If you saved the Tieflings in Act 1, but didn't free them from Moonrise Prison before letting Balthazar take the Night Song, every one of the prisoners will also show up as a zombie inside the Mind Flayer colony. So, what happens if you take off and leave them alive? You get Zombie Lacrissa serving drinks in the Elf Song Tavern.
You too good looking. Now get out of here. Can't be acting all soppy in front of the customers.
This works because the zombies are not technically considered dead, and any surviving Tiefling refugees are set to a new, friendly faction as soon as you reach Act 3. Before we leave the sewers, I've seen a lot of people ask about this invisible helper, and the answer is, it's not used for anything. Sorry to let you down. But let's try to get an idea of what it might have been intended to do. The invisible helper's internal name and layer data suggest that it would have been the source of a bit of dialogue from the Netherbrain during a tentacle attack on this poor doomed goblin. Excuse me, I mean doomed goblin. Maybe the tentacle would have broken through that sewer grate on the wall, or just through the ceiling like this one. The invisible helper is green on the minimap because it's set to a friendly faction just like the invisible voice of the Absolute in the Asylum. If you don't know how to get to the sewers, there are actually a few entrances, but this helpful cultist corpse will give you directions to the closest one. Just walk south from the Watch Citadel, hop down here, and bust through the rusted iron gate. Oh, and even though the Citadel has a bell tower, I'm sorry to say that ringing the bell doesn't summon any sheep. I'm willing to bet that most of you have never seen this particular steel watcher here in the High Hall courtyard, because it only appears under circumstances even less common than Minthara in the sewer, though maybe not zombie Minthara in the sewer. First, you gotta let Karlach try to attack Gortash during the coronation, and watch her get dragged off to jail by a steel watcher. Then, head down into Worms Rock Prison and talk to Karlach, but tell her that she's not welcome in the party if she's gonna go rogue. After that, leave Karlach to rot in her cell and take off without her. Once you exit the prison, your quest log will report that Karlach is gone for good. That's because she ran off to try to kill Gortash by herself, and failed. So, this one last steel watcher is probably made with Karlach's heart, and possibly the rest of her. The courtyard was also once meant to contain any companion that had previously left your party, as they'd been claimed by the Absolute.
Dead or alive, the Absolute will claim you!
Which I suppose makes sense, as they would have lost the Emperor's protection, just like Minthara. Moving on up to the top of High Hall, did you know that attacking the brainstem causes a brainquake? But more importantly, there's an even higher section of High Hall hidden in the game's files. This rooftop section is only briefly mentioned in a couple small dialogue files, but they imply that you would have climbed up and fought the Netherbrain in this area. And by Netherbrain, I mean that giant face brain in the background. Not the little brain, or this big brain in the Morphic Pool, or this fake brain in the middle of nowhere, or even this brain in the Asylum. This one starts out being named Elder Brain, as it's the source of some of the brain dialogue, such as the scene when you first reach the Morphic Pool. But as soon as you encounter the big brain in the pool, this Asylum brain changes its name to the Netherbrain for all future dialogue. There's actually a fair bit of cut content related to the Morphic Pool. For starters, it was going to be possible to find us waiting here, encouraging you to meet with the Elder Brain and embrace the grand design. There are also unfinished dialogue files that show the Netherbrain creating so-called Nether illusions of each of the companions as they traversed the area, taunting them for their weaknesses. And instead of going straight to High Hall from the Astral Prism, it seems the portal was going to send you back to the Morphic Pool, where you would see that the Netherbrain had taken off. There's dialogue in the files for this scene, but it's a bit rough.
It's gone to the city. We must follow.
To actually reach High Hall from here, you would have had to climb these vines, but unfortunately, clicking them now does nothing. After defeating the brain, the gang celebrates together on this dock, the brownest place in Faerun. So let's take a look around a bit and see what's here. You'd probably assume this lever doesn't do anything, but it actually lets you decide if a trolley should run over 10 tiefling children or 1 Shadowheart. And I don't know who built this place, but I'm guessing it was Wile E. Coyote. However, evidence in the files suggests that dock was not the original location for the final scenes with the companions. Despite what words Astarion actually says here,
I honestly don't mind what we do once we get to the... Ow!
There's a developer note that states his whole line would have been about getting off this beach. Also, every character has a designated spot around this blanket, with Karlach in the middle. They're even lined up in alphabetical order. What? No, I'm not going to make a joke about how this looks. There's also a trigger nearby that's labeled as the viewpoint for Gale's orb explosion when he destroys the brain, with the spot that's used in the finished game having a very similar name. You can also tell that this location used the Act 1 beach as a starting point, not only because of these various spots that line up, but also because of this crab. It's left over from an unfinished early access quest, but explaining that is going to have to wait for another video. Speaking of Astarion, when playing him as your avatar and remaining a vampire spawn, the ending will feature a short scene of him hiding in a dark cave with a friend. Even though you only get a brief glimpse of it, they put a fair bit of effort into making it look good. It even has a nice view of the city. As for Gale's avatar ending, if you meet up with Mystra in outer space, it sorta looks like they're standing on something. And that's because they are. You can't move around on this invisible platform, but it does give you a chance to have a very scenic conversation with your companions. And what about Karlach's ending? Well, Avernus is also an actual spot you can explore, and it's way below the rest of the map, which seems like where it should be. Though I don't know where Karlach thought she was running to, since there's a drop-off just a few meters in front of her. There's not a whole lot else to see out here besides these floating rocks and these spires. The axe that Karlach always has equipped during that scene is waiting for her here in the asylum. No sign of her cigars, though. Now that we're in the asylum, let's see what else is here. This netherstone says it's a Gortash stone placeholder, even though it looks like Ketheric stone. It's not used for anything, so I don't know what place it was meant to hold. This banana also has no purpose in the game, but it does weigh 10 kilograms, so maybe it was just used for scale. This version of Bane who forgot his clothes is just a placeholder for an earlier version of the Gods and Monsters ending, where Withers would address the Dead Three directly rather than just a painting of them. There are still triggers for each individual god, but they're out here in the void. When Raphael monologues at you about the crown after the credits, he's actually standing right here, on just a little bit of lanceboard. But it seems that the Dead Three were not the only big shots intended to make an appearance, as there's also a placeholder for Mephistopheles waiting around in the asylum. And he also has his own designated spot near Raphael. But there's a bit more than just that. There's also a level in the game files called Raphael Punished that's pretty rough, but does look suitably fiery for old Meph's tastes. It's possible that this map was going to be used for a more elaborate demonstration of Raphael's dad swallowing him after you took care of business in the House of Hope. On that note, there are also a lot of mentions of Mephisto's vault being an actual place you would visit, with the Orphic Hammer being kept there instead of in the House of Hope. The template for the Orphic Hammer even has Mephisto's vault in the name. Unfortunately, the level itself has nothing to it but a few triggers, so we can't go there. Oh, and in case you're wondering what triggers are, that's just Larian's term for any designated spot on the map used for all sorts of things. For example, if someone suddenly teleports to a spot, there's probably a trigger there. Of course, they're invisible, so you can't see them, but just about anywhere you go in the game is full of them. Before we move on to the epilogue, let's take a look at what else is in the asylum. As always, the Pixie and Monk are best friends, together forever. And the friends you made along the way are all stacked up right here, waiting for you to summon them into battle against the Brain. This red dragon says it's meant to be Voss's fire-breathing assistant, but it's never actually used. It is shaped like the other red dragons that are used to create the shadows on the ground when they fly overhead in the courtyard. But it's just blocking the view in here, so let me get it out of the way. The new friends you can summon to help you are all lined up back here, with the exception of this one Mind Flayer. It has only one purpose: to test this particular animation. Yep, that's it. But I had to change its faction to show it to you since it defaults to the same enemy faction as the rest of the Brain's forces, which leads to this happening. There's also a trigger nearby designed to test this spell, which tosses a bomb that summons a Mind Flayer. But you can also cast it anywhere else on this map. It seems someone forgot to delete this goblin. And I don't know what he was meant to celebrate, but I like to imagine that it was the ending where the Absolute wins the game. And hey, shouldn't you be dancing? Okay, that's better. Hiding next to the goblin, there's a tiny little invisible nautiloid. But the real Nautiloid out there in the distance is the one that pops in during the brain fight to rain fire down on the battlefield. Speaking of that fight, if you ditch the Emperor, you'll fight against these Dream Guardians, or as the developers call them, Super Daisies, which just doesn't sound very threatening. They're supposed to be disguised to look like your custom Daisy, but it just ends up using the default appearance for that race. As for your companions, it just sticks with the defaults you see here, without anyone specific for each origin character. That's why Astarions doesn't look like Cazador. On the other hand, if you side with the Emperor, these are the countermeasure thralls that will show up during the fight, and they're changed to match the class of the corresponding character. Though if you're multi-classing, it just picks one of your chosen classes at random. And you might be thinking this is one of the tentacles that pops up to attack you on top of the brain, but nope. Its only purpose is as a spot for a debug command to test teleporting the Nautiloid. Hey, don't ask me. The big brain and all its friends here are the same faction as that Mind Flayer I showed, so if someone from that back line was to make it over here, they'll attack them too. In fact, if you wait long enough, the Steel Watcher will kill the brain all on its own. The true hero of Baldur's Gate. After the narrator says,
"And it's all because of you. You.
We've finally reached the epilogue. And if you made the deal with Raphael, but then let Gale take the crown anyway, he'll show up to whine about it. But before that, he's waiting patiently down here in the asylum. Though if you made a trip to the House of Hope, he probably looks more like this. Raphael also has some rough draft dialogue that implies he would have shown up earlier during the party scene to take part in the festivities, and to demand the crown from you directly, or thank you for leaving it in the river for him. It looks like this was just replaced by the Gale conversation and the post-credits scene. If your avatar ascends to the heavens with Gale, that's not really your character, but actually this dummy in the asylum, wearing this robe, and disguised to look like them. Which is why Shadowheart's hair is black during that scene. If your avatar is a Mind Flayer, then the dummy is disguised as this one right here. They don't get to wear the robe, but at least they get some shiny gold armor. Once you get to Elysium, Gale says he has more to show you, and I hope he does because there's not all that much to see on this tiny platform. Though I will say those towers in the distance are really tall. Vlaakith is standing around in the asylum so that she can, give Lae'zel a new sword, there in her throne room. And I've been wanting to show you all this location for a long time. We've got some nice dragon statues, the braziers, which you can change from lit to even more lit, and these paintings of Vlaakith on the walls that don't show up anywhere else in the game. Yoink! The portrait in the creche is a different item with a different description, and it can't be looted. So what does Vlaakith keep in her chest? Just this? I was expecting, some kind of treasures fit for a queen. Speaking of, you can't sit on her throne, but you can sit in her throne. And what's this back here? Altar of Baal? What sort of shenanigans is Vlaakith up to? Okay, back to the asylum where we find Karlach's stuffed bear, Clive. He will only be down here if Karlach died on the dock or when she's your avatar. Otherwise, Clive is teleported to Karlach's pocket so that she can play with him during the party. Though she can also have fun with him anywhere else she wants. Even Mind Flayer Karlach has Clive, but sadly she never gets to play with him. If for some strange reason you don't have Scratch in your camp, the inert astral prism will be down here in the asylum, instead of in his mouth where it should be. In fact, any character that could be at the party but wasn't around to get their invitation will be teleported to this spot, though some of them don't get along very well. This chest contains every item that was in your inventory unless you've got it equipped or bound. And right next to it is a letter? Actually, it's a whole lot of letters. All the possible letters start out here before the correct ones are sent into the chest in camp. A few impossible letters are here too, so let's cover a bit of that. It is actually possible to see the letters from Shadowheart's parents in-game, but only under very specific conditions. You ready? First of all, Shadowheart has to save her parents, of course. If you're playing as Avatar Shadowheart, you have to reach this solo ending scene, meaning you had no living romance partner after leaving the dock. Then you gotta pick this choice to go live on the farm with your parents. On the other hand, if Shadowheart is a companion, you must be in a romance with her, since the choice you need to make is in this scene. To get the letters, your avatar cannot retire to the farm with Shadowheart. This means that if you're a Mind Flayer, the correct flag is set if you don't try to talk her into taking your tentacles back to the farm, which will also end the romance during the epilogue. Though if you're not a Mind Flayer, you need to straight up tell her that you're really not into farms and then take off. But in this case, the romance is not ended in the epilogue. She'll just ditch her parents and go on adventures with you. Okay, so you did all that, but you still don't see the letters? That's because, unlike every other one, the letters from Shadowheart's parents are sent directly to her inventory instead of into the chest. If Shadowheart is your avatar, they're right there in your bag. But if she's your companion, you guessed it, you gotta pickpocket her just to read them. Kaga's letter, Koga, whatever. Her letter can be seen in-game, but only under weird circumstances. Naturally, you gotta turn her away from the Shadow Druids and end the Ritual of Thorns. But after that, you have to just take off without ever dealing with the Goblin leaders. If you help the Tieflings to leave the Grove, the letter won't show up in the epilogue chest. The letters from Isabel or Nightsong would be easy to get, but the script checks for this flag when it should check for this flag. I mean, everyone knows that. As long as Alfira is alive, she'll send you a letter, even if you never actually talk to her. Oddly, she doesn't mention that Lacrissa is a zombie. Gale's improvised letter is waiting here until his spectral version hands it over, either after Gale used the orb to blow up the Netherbrain, or if he tried, and failed, to become a god. And the text is changed to match your relationship with him. Or at least it's supposed to be, but I already covered all that in another video. And if you were in a partnership with Gale, you'll have a chance to hear his romantic final words.
The orb.
If the Dark Urge gave in to the Urge, but refused to control the Netherbrain, then agreed to lock themselves in prison, these are the clothes they'll be wearing in the scene with Withers. And this other set of clothes is here for you to piss in when showing up to the party, after busting out of jail. And no wonder she got out of prison so easily, the cell door wasn't even locked. Before we take a look around in here, let's brighten up the mood a bit. That's better. And if this place looks familiar, that's because it's copied from Heapside Prison in the lower city. Let's see what's out this back door. Impossible to open, nice try. For some reason, instead of being in the asylum, the Pixie and Monk are standing out here, even though the Pixie Bell gets moved to the chest, so there's no way to summon her. And finally, the epilogue also features my new favorite trigger name. Don't delete because shipped in patch 4 and will crash older save games if removed. So at long last, we've covered every level in the game. And I appreciate you sticking around for the whole thing. Thanks for watching.